Have you ever wondered what turns a good army into an unstoppable force? Before Sultan Murad II, the Ottoman military was known for its speed and aggression, like a whirlwind of fury, but Murad changed the game entirely. When Murad II took the Ottoman throne in 1421, he wasn't met with celebrations, but with rebellion and war. Across Europe, crusader armies were sharpening their swords, eager to test the strength of the new sultan. Murad II wasn't destined to be a man of peace. He would go down in history as a warrior sultan, the man who not only saved his empire from collapse, but restored its fearsome military dominance. Almost immediately after Murad's ascension, a dangerous pretender emerged. A man claiming to be Mustafa Kelebi, a long-lost son of the great Sultan Bayezid, challenged Murad for the throne. The Byzantine Empire, always looking for a chance to weaken its rival, through its support behind him. Their goal was simple: to plunge the Ottoman Empire back into the chaos of civil war. But Murad was not his predecessors. He acted with lightning speed. His forces cornered the rebellion, crushing Mustafa's army. The false prince was captured and swiftly executed. The message to the world was loud and clear. The era of Ottoman civil war was over. But the challenges weren't just from outsiders. Soon after, Murad's own brother, Prince K.K. Mustafa, launched another rebellion, threatening to tear apart the Ottoman heartland of Anatolia, refusing to let his empire be divided. Murad marched personally to confront him. The rebellion crumbled under the Sultan's advance, and like the pretender before him, his brother was executed. For the first time since the devastating Battle of Ankara decades earlier, the Ottoman throne was completely secure. Murad II now ruled without a single rival. With his home front secured, Murad turned his gaze west, toward Europe. The Ottomans' internal struggles had made their European rivals bold. The kingdoms of Hungary, Serbia, Poland, and even the papacy began forming powerful alliances, all driven by a single goal: to push the Ottomans out of the Balkans for good. But Murad had very different plans. He launched a series of relentless campaigns across the Balkan Peninsula. One by one, cities fell and fortresses surrendered. Ottoman control, which had weakened during the civil wars, was now expanding with terrifying speed. Serbia was forced to become an Ottoman vassal state. Wallachia began paying tribute. The shadow of the empire fell over Bosnia. The Ottoman giant was not just awake, it was on the rise again, and all of Europe watched in alarm. This growing fear culminated in 1444, when Europe organized a massive, unified crusade. Led by the powerful kingdoms of Hungary and Poland, a huge Christian army marched south. They were confident. They believed the young Sultan Murad was weak and that an Ottoman defeat was inevitable. They were disastrously wrong. Murad didn't send a general. He led his army in person. The two forces finally met near the city of Varna, on the coast of the Black Sea. The Battle of Varna was savage. The Crusaders, fueled by religious fervor, attacked aggressively. In the early stages, the Ottoman lines buckled under the pressure. It seemed like the European knights might just break through. But then, in a moment of reckless bravery, the Polish king Władysław saw what he thought was an opportunity. He gathered his elite knights and charged directly at the Ottoman center, aiming for Sultan Murad himself. It was a fatal mistake. The veteran Ottoman soldiers closed in, surrounding the king and his retinue. In the chaos, King Władysław was unhorsed and killed. The sight of their king's head on a spear sent a wave of panic through the Crusader army. Their morale shattered instantly. The Ottomans seized the moment, and the disciplined counterattack turned into a brutal rout. The Crusade of Varna ended not in victory, but as one of the greatest military disasters in European history. After this monumental victory, Murad did something no one expected. At the height of his power, he stepped down from the throne and handed the reins of the empire to his son, Mehmed, who was only 12 years old. Murad was tired of war. He longed for a life of peace and quiet contemplation. But destiny, it seemed, was not finished with him. Seeing a mere child on the Ottoman throne, Europe couldn't resist the temptation. Hungary, eager for revenge, organized another crusade. Panic gripped the Ottoman capital. The senior generals and viziers, fearing the empire would be destroyed, sent urgent messages to Murad in his retirement, begging him to return. With his empire in peril, the old warrior couldn't refuse. Murad came back, took command of the army once more and marched to face the enemy. In 1448, the two armies met on the historic Kosovo field, the same ground where Murad's grandfather had fought a legendary battle decades before. This was more than just a battle. It was the final, decisive test for Ottoman dominance in Europe. The fighting raged for 3 long, bloody days. But in the end, Murad's tactical genius and the discipline of his army proved superior. The Crusader coalition was utterly destroyed. With this victory, Europe's dream of expelling the Ottomans from the Balkans died forever. From this moment on, Ottoman rule in southeastern Europe was an undeniable, permanent reality. After the victory at Kosovo, Murad II once again handed the throne to his son, Mehmed, but this time it was for good. The old sultan had fulfilled his duty. He had secured the empire's borders, crushed every rebellion, and decisively defeated 2 massive crusades. He had restored Ottoman military supremacy. Now, it was time for the next generation. All this time, the young Sultan Mehmed had been watching, learning, and preparing, and his eyes were fixed on a single prize, a city that had resisted Muslim armies for over 800 years, Constantinople. Murad II never conquered Constantinople himself, but he was the architect of its fall. After the Second Battle of Kosovo, Europe's spirit was broken. The grand crusading alliances, once filled with knights and kings full of confidence, now lay shattered. Across the continent, from the courts of Hungary to the halls of Venice, a terrifying realization dawned. The Ottomans were not a passing storm. They were a permanent force, a new reality that had reshaped the very map of power in Eastern Europe. For centuries, Europeans had viewed the Turks as temporary invaders, a problem that could be pushed back across the straits. Kosovo in 1448 ended that illusion forever. The balance had shifted, and everyone knew it. But Murad II was more than just a conqueror. He was a master strategist, a political genius who understood that empires aren't held by the sword alone. He knew that lasting stability required something more than fear. So, he offered a different path. Instead of deposing every local ruler in the Balkans, he allowed them to keep their titles and lands. They're part of the deal. Pay tribute and acknowledge Ottoman authority. He extended a hand of tolerance to Christian communities, guaranteeing them religious freedom, a stark contrast to the religious conflicts raging within Europe itself. This masterstroke of diplomacy transformed potential rebels into loyal vassals. The Ottoman system, with its clear lines of authority and surprising tolerance, began to look far more stable and predictable than the chaotic and oppressive feudal systems of their European neighbors. Rebellion simmered down, not because of brutal suppression, but because for many, Ottoman rule offered a better, more secure life. With the Balkans pacified through a mix of force and diplomacy, Murad turned his attention inward to the heart of his power, the military. He wasn't content with just winning battles. He wanted to build an unbeatable war machine. The Janissaries, the elite infantry of the empire, saw their training intensified and their equipment upgraded. But the real revolution was in technology. Murad invested heavily in artillery, expanding the cannon foundries and recruiting European experts. Gunpowder, once a novelty, was now becoming the centerpiece of Ottoman strategy. Cavalry tactics were refined, integrating them with infantry and artillery in a way no European army could match. The Ottoman military was modernizing at a breathtaking pace, creating a combined arms force that was decades ahead of its time, while Europe clung to its feudal knights and medieval tactics. The Ottomans were building the army of the future, yet behind the fearsome warrior and brilliant statesman was a man of deep contradictions. Murad II was not a bloodthirsty tyrant. He was a devout Muslim who valued art, poetry, and scholarship. Often surrounding himself with the greatest minds of his time, he was known to avoid unnecessary cruelty and showed mercy when others would have chosen vengeance. After years of relentless campaigning, a deep weariness settled upon him. He longed for peace, for a quiet life of reflection and prayer. This profound inner conflict between his duty to the empire and his personal desire for tranquility led him to abdicate the throne not once, but twice. He wanted to step away, to leave the world of war and politics behind. But the empire, besieged by enemies, kept pulling him back. The empire needed its warrior sultan, even if the man himself yearned for the life of a simple scholar. This internal struggle deeply influenced how he prepared his heir. Murad was determined that his son, Mehmed, would not be just another ruler. He needed to be a conqueror, a leader capable of fulfilling the empire's ultimate destiny. Murad personally oversaw Mehmed's rigorous education. The young prince was immersed in military strategy, studying the campaigns of Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. He mastered Islamic law and theology, but also delved into mathematics and engineering. Crucially, he was taught multiple languages and became fluent in Greek, studying the history of Rome and Byzantium with an obsessive focus. Murad wasn't just raising a son, he was forging a weapon. He was shaping a mind that could understand his enemies, innovate on the battlefield, and possess the unshakable will to achieve what no one before him ever could. And that one ultimate goal loomed over everything: Constantinople. The city was more than just a strategic prize. It was a symbol, a dream that had haunted Muslim rulers for nearly 800 years. Countless armies had dashed themselves against its legendary triple walls. Even Murad II himself had tried and failed to take the city. The defenses were simply too strong, the challenge too great. But failure did not extinguish the dream. Instead, it intensified it. Murad understood that his role might be to prepare the ground, to build the strength and forge the will necessary for the next generation. He planted the seed of conquest in his son's mind, nurturing it with stories of past glory and prophecies of a great Muslim conqueror who would finally claim the city. One generation forges the sword, another wields it to victory. In his final years, Murad II finally found the peace he had so long desired. He stepped back from the daily grind of politics and war, entrusting more and more responsibility to his ministers and to his son. He lived a simple, ascetic life, far from the splendors of the court. His days were spent in prayer and reflection, looking back on a life defined by conflict. He had secured the empire's borders, crushed its enemies, and built an administrative and military machine of unparalleled power. He had given his entire life to the state, and now his time was drawing to a close. He had done his duty. In the winter of 1451, Sultan Murad II passed away peacefully at his palace in Edirne. His death marked the end of an era. Unlike so many of his predecessors, he did not leave an empire in chaos or on the brink of civil war. He left behind an empire at the zenith of its power, a treasury full of gold, and an army hungry for glory. And he left behind a son perfectly prepared for the moment. At the age of just 19, Mehmed II ascended to the throne. He was young, brilliant, fiercely ambitious, and consumed by a single, all-encompassing obsession: the conquest of Constantinople. Across Europe, the news of Murad's death was met with a sigh of relief, followed by dismissive laughter. The great warrior was gone, replaced by a mere boy. The kings and princes of Christendom saw Mehmed as young, untested, and arrogant. They believed the Ottoman threat would now recede. They expected a period of internal strife, a young sultan struggling to control his court. They fundamentally misunderstood the man Murad had been and the son he had created. They saw a teenager on the throne. They failed to see the storm gathering on the horizon, a storm that Murad had spent a lifetime preparing. Their condescension would prove to be a fatal miscalculation. Immediately upon taking power, Mehmed II unleashed the full force of the Ottoman state. There was no hesitation, no period of consolidation. The war machine that Murad had so carefully built roared to life. Orders were given to construct a massive fortress on the Bosphorus, Rumalisar, designed to cut off Constantinople from any sea-based aid. The empire's cannon foundries worked day and night, forging monstrous new artillery pieces, bigger than anything the world had ever seen. Armies were mobilized, supply lines organized, and strategies refined. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a defensive power reacting to crusades. Under Mehmed II, it had become a force of nature, preparing to unleash a final, decisive blow that would change the world forever. Murad II had fought the battles that paved the way. Now, his son, Mehmed, would fight the one that would grant him immortality. He didn't just fight wars, he engineered them. He transformed warfare from a chaotic brawl into a calculated science. Battles were no longer spontaneous clashes. They were masterpieces of planning, sometimes months in the making. Supply routes became lifelines, meticulously protected. Intelligence networks were his eyes and ears, gathering crucial information long before the first arrow was loosed. This methodical, strategic approach to war was Murad's true legacy. It was this very evolution that would later empower his son Mehmed II to take on the most formidable fortress on earth and succeed where so many others had failed. Murad's military reforms were nothing short of revolutionary. While Europe was still clinging to the traditions of medieval warfare, Murad was building the army of the future. He dramatically expanded the artillery units, recognizing the game-changing power of gunpowder. He wasn't just buying cannons. He was recruiting the best engineers from across the known world to design and improve them. Ottoman fortification designs were enhanced, making their own strongholds nearly impregnable. On the battlefield, new formations were introduced, allowing the army to use its firearms and cannons with devastating effectiveness. While European commanders debated the merits of knights versus longbows, the Ottomans were mastering combined arms tactics, integrating infantry, cavalry, and artillery into a seamless, lethal machine. They weren't just adapting to the future, they were creating it. But Murad's greatest weapon wasn't always a sword or a cannon. Often, it was his mind. He was a grand master of diplomacy, playing the political game with incredible skill. He understood that a victory won without bloodshed was the most efficient victory of all. He would masterfully sign peace treaties with one enemy, only to isolate and weaken another. He knew when to offer a bribe to a rival commander, sowing dissent within enemy coalitions. He was an expert at dividing powerful alliances, turning allies against each other until they collapsed from within. Time and again, he defeated his enemies without a single major battle, saving his army's strength for when it was truly needed. This very skill set would be inherited by Mehmed, who would use these same diplomatic tactics to ensure Constantinople stood alone, with no allies to come to its aid. Murad also understood a fundamental truth of warfare. Soldiers fight harder when they believe in a cause greater than themselves. He worked tirelessly to strengthen the bond between the state and the religious authorities. He sought the counsel of Islamic scholars, and their fatwas, or religious rulings, provided divine sanction for his military campaigns. This created a profound sense of religious unity that permeated the entire army. Ottoman soldiers weren't just fighting for land or for their self. They were fighting for a higher purpose, for their faith. This gave them a psychological edge that was almost impossible to counter. Their morale was unbreakable because their cause felt righteous. This spiritual strength was just as critical to their success as their steel swords and powerful cannons. History loves to celebrate victories and conquests, but it often forgets the human cost paid by the leaders who achieve them. Murad II's life was one of immense personal sacrifice. While we picture sultans surrounded by the lavish luxury of the palace, Murad spent most of his life in dusty military camps and on windswept battlefields. He traded a life of comfort for a mantle of immense responsibility. He rarely had the chance to enjoy his family or the splendors of his court. His days were filled with strategy meetings, troop inspections, and the constant stress of command. He carried the weight of an empire on his shoulders, and that weight was a heavy one. We remember the battles he won, but we must also remember the personal happiness he gave up to win them. Under Murad's leadership, the Ottoman army was forged into a culture of absolute discipline. Discipline wasn't just a rule, it was a sacred principle. Desertion, the act of abandoning your comrades, was met with the harshest punishments. Cowardice on the battlefield was simply not tolerated. This wasn't just about fear, though it was also about fairness. Merit was the only thing that mattered. A common soldier could rise through the ranks based on their bravery and skill, not their family name. This created an incredible sense of unity and purpose. Soldiers trusted their commanders, and they trusted each other. They fought as one single body, with one will, one purpose. This unbreakable cohesion is what made them seem unstoppable. A single, living weapon on the battlefield. As Murad felt his life drawing to a close, he passed on his final, most important lessons. In a private conversation with his young son, Mehmed, he shared the hard-won wisdom of a lifetime at war. He warned him that power is a magnet for enemies, both seen and unseen. He cautioned that victory can breed a dangerous arrogance, the downfall of many great leaders. And most importantly, he stressed that conquest, true and lasting conquest, requires infinite patience. It's a game of chess, not a wild charge. These words weren't just fatherly advice. They were the final tempering of the steel. They deeply shaped Mem's mindset, giving him the focus and strategic patience he would need for the monumental task that lay ahead. After Murad's death, a deceptive calm fell over the region. The leaders of Europe breathed a sigh of relief. They saw a young, untested sultan on the Ottoman throne, and assumed the era of aggressive expansion was over. They believed a long peace would follow. They could not have been more wrong. The quiet in the Ottoman capital was not the silence of rest. It was the silence of intense, unprecedented preparation. The forges glowed day and night. The strategists huddled over maps. The greatest army the world had ever seen was being assembled for a single purpose. The calm was just the deep breath before the plunge. The siege of Constantinople was coming. For over 1,000 years, Constantinople had stood as the queen of cities, a bastion of Christendom that had defied every enemy. Its survival wasn't just luck, it was a marvel of engineering and geography. The legendary Theodosian walls were a triple-layered defense system, so massive and complex that they were considered impregnable. The city's location on a peninsula, surrounded by water on 3 sides, made it a natural fortress. Its sea defenses, including a giant chain that blocked the Golden Horn harbor, had thwarted countless naval assaults. For centuries, armies had shattered themselves against its defenses. Too many. Conquering Constantinople wasn't just difficult. It was simply impossible. But the word impossible only holds meaning until someone dares to challenge it. And a challenger was rising. In the Topkapi Palace, the young Sultan Mehmed II was consumed by a single, burning obsession. He spent his days studying ancient and modern maps of the city. He devoured the histories of the Roman and Byzantine empires. He meticulously analyzed every past siege of Constantinople, learning from every failure. He sought out engineers, architects, and weapons masters. Every night, one thought dominated his mind: Constantinople must fall. This wasn't just for glory or for the expansion of his empire. For Mehmed, it was something more. It was about fulfilling a prophecy. It was about completing the destiny of the Ottoman people. The city was the key to unlocking the future, and he was determined to be the one to turn it. And so, our story reaches its final, pivotal moment. Murad II was the architect and the sword, the one who reformed the army, perfected the strategy, and laid the foundation. Now, his son, Mehmed II, would be the hammer, ready to strike the final decisive blow. Together, this father and son had reshaped the course of history. The stage is now set. The largest army in the world is ready to march. The greatest cannons ever built are being hauled into position, and the world is about to change forever. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey through the rise of the Ottoman Empire. If you've enjoyed this series, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss what comes next.